Good morning, everyone. So, I'm going to start in memory of a good friend, BJ, from Little Rock. We're going to start with some calisthenics today. So can everyone stand up, please? Okay, it's important to stretch before you sit here for an hour and a half, and we'll promise to keep it as short as possible. Now, take that right arm or your left arm, whichever you want, reach into your pocket. Find your cell phone, reach into your purse, turn it on mute, and give your attention to the presenters today. It's just a short 2-day session, and I know you have a lot of questions. So do we. So how many of you, go ahead and sit down. That's all right. Yeah. You feel refreshed, though? Fantastic. How many of you have done this before? Been either on LFCC or PCFO in the past? Can you raise your hand? Quite a few. Great. And we have a lot of new timers. A little closer, Mike? Okay. We have a lot of first timers. That's fantastic. Now, how many of you came to this session expecting to find out everything that's going to change and be new after this year? Huh? Okay, well, the line starts right here, right behind me. So we are not going to be sharing that because, quite frankly, we don't know all the answers yet. What we are going to do today is we're going to give you the best practices of how to run the very best campaign that you can this year. My name is Larry Heisel. I'm the Executive Director of the Federal Executive Board in Kansas City. If you're not familiar with FEBs, we're kind of like Chamber of Commerce for federal agencies in the metropolitan areas. There's 28 of us across the country, and we coordinate emergency activities, trainings, as well as intergovernmental outreach. Now, we have one of the, what I would consider one of the best CFC directors, Jennifer Howard here from Dallas-Fort Worth. So give Jennifer a big welcome. Come on. Woo! So we're going to give you the give and take of CFC 101 on the PCFO side and the LFCC side. So first of all, some of the objectives. We're going to talk about the campaign, why we do a CFC campaign, the benefits of CFC, the governance structure, the roles and responsibilities. We'll go into some detail on that, and then the campaign operations. We're going to kind of go through a calendar of the year of what you should expect this year. But first of all, let's start with the history of the CFC itself. CFC started in 1961 officially. Now, back before 1961, you may have had a whole slew of different campaigns going on at any particular time. You had somebody in your office raising money for Red Cross, someone for Salvation Army, someone selling Girl Scouts cookies, someone doing something for community chess. Everyone had their own favorite charities. And the administration actually started looking at it in the 50s, but they looked at it and said, you know what? Why don't we combine all these charitable activities during just one time a year? And we'll call it something really creative. Combined federal campaign. Okay, well, government's not very good in marketing themselves, but they came up with a process that has really been the most effective process, and it was become the largest employee fundraising campaign across the world. So over the history of CFC, over the 50 years, over $7 billion has been raised for national, international, and local charities. So again, you've really made a difference. And I want you to think about back in 1961. What changes have happened during that time? What was the #1 disease back in 1961? Polio. That's right. Maybe some people out there that still have their polio shots in their left arm. And you keep in mind, back in the late 60s, if you had a child that was born with autism or some developmental disability, a lot of times the only place they could go to was a state hospital. Now there's agencies that work with those kids from birth on through their adult life. Even as recently the 80s, if you had a child that was born just 2 months premature, they only had 25% chance of survival. Now it's over 75%. These are all things that you have done over the past years. If you've been involved, if you've donated, you've volunteered your time, that's what the CFC campaign has done. By the time many of us in this room retire, there may be no cancer agencies in the campaign, in the charity booklet. We've seen cures from some of the cancers over even the last 10 years through DNA research and such like that. So you are really making a difference, and I want to applaud you for taking the time out of your work schedule to be part of the campaign again this year. The benefits of CFC. We call them the 3 C's, if we can get them out there. First one is confidence. All the nonprofits you see in the charity list, whether it's in a booklet or online, are applying on an annual basis. They all go through an annual audit if they are over $250,000 or more. They are reviewed by LFCC members, federal employees, just like yourself. How many of you know what LFCC stands for? Or don't know, excuse me. Okay, Local Federal Coordinating Committee. If you're a government employee, you're working on the campaign, that's you. Okay, and of course the donor information is protected. So the confidence of that, the choice. You know, in the campaign with universal giving, there is 20,000 choices for anyone to give to. And the convenience through the establishment of payroll deduction or electronic pledging, it's real easy to take care of your favorite charity through the campaign. The structure of the CFC, and Jennifer and I are both going to kind of go through this, but we want to kind of give you a structure of how it works out. The Office of Personnel Management, OPM, is the oversight agency for the campaign within the government. OPM is like the HR agency for government agencies. They set the policy and procedures. Now, they work with local federal coordinating committees. The local federal coordinating committee could be a group of volunteers, federal volunteers within a area. Could be the commanders or garrison commander or the commanding general of a military installation. Could be a federal executive board. Or again, it could be some strong volunteers that want to participate. So those LFCs currently, they will choose, they will send out a request for a PCFO, which is a Principal Combined Fund Organization. Okay, a lot of times that may be a United Way or Community Health Charities or Earthshare. There's a lot of different nonprofits that will serve as a PCFO, and that's when the lines start going everywhere. The PCFO, as well as with the LFCC, the LFCC is going to work with the PCFO to actually work with the local, national, international charities. The PCFO is going to work with the campaign coordinators and also work with the local charities. So again, you know, we're all in this together. It is really a nice marriage as far as how they work together. OPM itself, sorry, I have a heavy thumb. I promise I'll get it there. Okay. If I don't, okay. Anybody have questions about OPM? Because I'm not going to get to that slide apparently. So they publish. OPM publishes the national charity list that you will receive in August of each year, at least by August of each year. It establishes the annual timelines, which we'll show you in a few minutes. It provides guidance to both the PCFO and the LFCC. It's responsible for actually the eligibility for the national and international charities. The local LFCs are responsible for the local charities right now. And they have the final ruling for those local charities as well. So if you turn down an agency in your campaign for a good reason, and if you do so, and there's going to be an eligibility training, I believe, later on today, they'll tell you about this. But if you have if you turn down a charity, they can still appeal to OPM, who has a final appeal ratio. They also oversee the audits, and they host the payroll systems, online pay systems, as well as these trainings. The LFCC, again, they make the final campaign decision. Now, it could be you may have various levels of LFCC. For example, in my campaign, we have a federal executive board, and that is the main LFCC. The Federal Executive Board solicits the contract for the PCFO. They approve the budget, the timeline, and ultimately they set the goal for the campaign. But we designate one of our senior officials to be the chair of the CFC LFCC, or our campaign cabinet. So with that, we liaison with the federal agencies. We hire the PCFO, and then we have the PCFO oversight from there. Now, again, this is not a full-time job for the LFCC. again, I appreciate you taking time to do that. There are limited time and resources that are in it, but per regulations, you are allowed time off your work as long as it's approved by your agency head or your superior to work on the campaign. So they are collaborating not only with the PCFO, the OPM, but as well as any federal executive boards or federal executive associations you might have out there. And also, you want to partner, especially this year, partner with other LFCCs and other campaigns that might be close to you. But the closest relationship we have is with the PCFO. And I'm going to invite Jennifer up here to talk about that.
Good morning. One more time, good morning. All right, that was better. Welcome to Fort Worth, where I'm from here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Actually a little bit west, but we're happy to host, to be a host city. Kind of. It's a lot of work. All right, so let's get on to the PCFO. So Principal Combined Fund Organization, this is the nonprofit that was hired by the LFCC, typically on an annual or tri-annual basis, different contract timelines, but the PCFO reports to the LFCC. We also report to OPM on occasion as well when they ask requests of us. We facilitate lots of things. So your application reviews, your charity trainings, your coordinator trainings, there's a lot of work that's done by the PCFOs. Developing the campaign materials. Let me remind you that all of the things that we do typically must be approved in some format by OPM. So make sure you're documenting things, and if you're not certain, should this or shouldn't this be an approved process, probably just get it approved, get it recorded in your minutes. That's my safe catch. We serve as the fiscal agent, money in, money out. So we're essentially a pass-through, if you will, bringing the dollars in and ensuring that the dollars go where the donor designates. We ensure that we are in compliance with OPM. And while that seems like a very daunting task, honestly, it's kind of like being a parent-child relationship. If you just listen the first time and follow the rules, you'll be just fine. So OPM is your friend, and I encourage you to find out who your OPM representative is. If you haven't met them already, make sure you say hello to them. And don't be shy to defer to them. They're here to help you. Questions so far? All right. Collaborating. We are collaborating on a daily basis, whether it's with our internal team, our PCFO as our employers, the Office of Personnel Management, the board. You should be in constant communication with your boards, your local federal coordinating committees. If there's an acronym that one of us shoots out that you don't know, please raise your hand and ask, because there are so many government acronyms, it's quite crazy. And there's still some that I come across that I don't know, so please do ask the question. We work with federal agencies, volunteers, nonprofits, and as many of you guys might have already been made aware, the nonprofit world and the federal world are two completely different worlds. So remember, when you're speaking a language, to understand the language that you need to speak, whether it's to your nonprofits or to the federal community that you're serving. Always being innovative. This is something that I have found to be so important. Don't recreate the wheel. There are so many ideas in this room, so asking questions and collaborating here while you're here, please make the most of it. I challenge each of you to sit somewhere new while you're here and to say hi and introduce yourself. And I'm actually very introverted, and I don't care for public speaking. I've told that to many of you. It's part of the job. But what I've found is the more that I step out on the ledge and be a little bit brave, the better I am at what I'm doing. So be brave, be bold, and we're going to be bright and be gone here really quickly because I got to go to lunch. All right, so you got your campaign team. And Larry, please feel free to shove me out of the way. Just don't send me off the stage. And let me know when you want to take over. So your campaign team, we got a couple different terms here. You got your campaign chair. Typically here in Dallas-Fort Worth, our campaign chair rotates in based on our federal executive board. So whoever is going to be the incoming federal executive board chair prior to that term, they get the pleasure of working with us and our team and being our LFCC chair. That works incredibly well in our community. It may not be something that's makes sense for your community, and that's one thing that I will say. In some of the early years when I first started coming to these, I'd think, that sounds great, but I don't even have an FEB. I came from the Alaska CFC. Do we have Alaska in the room? Yay! Hi, Alaska. That's where I was raised as a kid, and they had an FEA. So you'll hear things here that maybe don't make sense to your area, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that you can't mirror it or take something from it and make it work. So think about how this might work in your area as you go through this training. Loaned executives. In Alaska, I didn't have loaned executives. I got down to Dallas-Fort Worth, and I was like, what's a loaned executive? I knew what they were, but I had no idea what that meant or how I was supposed to train these federal employees to lead the efforts here in the Metroplex. And at first I thought, I don't need those, I can handle it. Let me tell you, Dallas-Fort Worth, as you guys know, when you got to the airport to here was quite a haul, right? Dallas is all the way the other direction. It's massive. It's a lot of ground. We're in the campaign season, we call ourselves road warriors, and we need our loaned executives. We need our federal community to support us in this effort. Coordinators, these are and the key workers. Coordinators are going to be the head volunteer from your agency. So typically you'll have a coordinator named sometime in June or July, and they will recruit, we like to say, one key worker per every 25 employees. Let's be realistic. That doesn't always happen, does it? Right? Ha, ha, ha. That's funny, Jennifer. While this training isn't intended to be funny, there is some funny parts. So the key workers, though, truthfully, when we go out and we train our coordinators and then we go out and we train the key workers, these are the boots on the ground. This is our frontline defense. And let's be honest, guys, this stuff is personal. It is personal, and you have to train them up to understand that making an ask isn't about asking somebody for their money. It's about explaining to them that they have an opportunity to make a difference in their community, that it's almost like a benefit being a federal employee, kind of like a 401k, only you're giving it back to your community to make a difference. It's an opportunity to make a difference. And so once they kind of get over I can remember the first time that I was in the private sector and the HR lady came and said, you're going to be our coordinator for the campaign that they were running, and I was like, absolutely not. I'm not asking people for their money. I'd have told you then that there was no way, I'd have bet a lot of money if I was a betting person, that I'd be here doing this today, because I was so uncomfortable asking people for their money. Now I understand that this work is not only fantastic and fun, it's important. It's important to the communities that we serve. So when you're training your coordinators and your key workers, make sure you help them to understand this message, because to me, and then I always tell them, and let me promise you that while you might be a voluntold here, you're going to come back and you're going to want to do it again because it's going to be fun. And they do. They often walk away saying their lives are changed, or they even come back and they say, Jennifer, will you hire me? I'll leave my federal job to work for you. I'm like, oh, that's so nice. But they do. They finally see that the CFC is so incredibly important, and we try to make it fun along the way. Ooh, I have a heavy thumb too. Okay, we've got a problem with our remote. Is this what you were going through? Yeah, watch.
Yep. I know.
Okay, let's take it forward to and back to. Let's improvise. Bam. All right. Local, national, international, nonprofit organizations. These are your charities. As Larry mentioned, they apply annually. They're vetted by the federal employees. Your federal employees should be doing the review process, not the PCFO. We can bring the apps in. We can screen them for completeness. We can check off those lovely completeness review forms that we got from OPM just, I don't know, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, whenever that was. It all runs together in my head. Screen them. Follow up with the charities. Do enough for your LFCC, your federal employees, to do the work for them, to make it easy on them, because let's face it, this is not their real job. Follow up. Hey, charity, your attachment A isn't going to cut it. Hey, charity, your audit is from the wrong time frame, or it doesn't match your 990. Follow up and get everything in place so that when your LFCC comes in, essentially they walk in and I say, here are all the applications. All these are fantastic. You'll have no problems. These ones over here, find the problems, and they're usually flagged. So while I've reviewed them for them, my LFCC is fantastic. And I open up my office for a week to 4 weeks, depending on the time frame, what we're working with, and say, come when you can, review when you can, and they go through it and they start checking off the applications. Going back to the charities, we need to keep them informed. Recently, we had a memorandum that was issued that OPM, the first thing they said was, share this with your federation members. When you see that, do it. Share it with your federation members. Because we got to keep them informed. They don't know what they don't know unless we tell them. We have a big job, don't we? Designation and acknowledgement reports. They're due out, I think, March 14th this year is the date. Depending on where the weekend, the calendar falls. So this is telling them, hey, this is how much you can expect to receive. This is when you'll receive it. And here are the people that said they want to be acknowledged. And sometimes there's nobody, and you have to tell them because they didn't release it. Take an opportunity when you send this message out to also say, and if you have feedback, please share it with me about the campaign season. Because let's remember in our audit, let's think smarter, let's work smarter, not harder. There's certain things in our audit, if you haven't seen an audit guide, get a copy from last year and look at it. Because suddenly you'll go, I have to do that too? I have to do this too? Nobody told me. Well, nobody told me anything either. Do your homework, look ahead, look through the audit guide. You'll see a lot of the in-between things that you should be doing that hopefully we touch on, and you'll learn a lot just by reviewing that document. Speakers, tours, and fairs. I didn't have this in Alaska. I got down here, and I can remember walking in to one of the girls who was working out of our office and saying, we don't need that. Who needs that? Well, let me tell you, she was like, you will cripple your campaign if you get rid of that program. The federal agencies, it is so important here in Dallas-Fort Worth to have that, your agencies out speaking. So when you spend, remember, we're dealing with two different federal community, nonprofit. You know, in Texas, we like our guns. Right? And you have to tell your charities you can't go onto federal property with your gun rack. You'll be turned away, right? No kidding. Or post office, don't wear open-toed shoes. So train your charities up, help them to be successful and to have the tools they need to make an impact in the federal agencies when they go out. You want your federal agency coordinators and employees to come back and say, wow, those were fantastic speakers. We really like them. You don't want them coming back saying, they showed up with a bird and we didn't know they were coming with a bird, you know, because they weren't trained up correctly, right? So make sure you train your charities up well. Here's that memorandum I was talking about, the removal of the statewide and adjacent, what do you call that? Application, ways to apply. You guys, has everybody seen this? What's that? Local presence. Thank you, Valerie. Has everybody seen this memorandum? Yes, no, maybe so? I'm going to try and explain it to you the best I know how, and this will be covered later in the eligibility. So if you have questions, Marcus, are you in here? He'll be able to answer those later when he trains you guys on local eligibility. Basically, they have removed the statewide and adjacent options. So charities applying this year, so my list went down quite a bit. I used to have 5 federations, now only 2 qualify. So 3 federations, that's a lot of applications, potentially a big chunk that I don't have to review or my board doesn't have to review any longer. You have to be local. You have to have a service office in the campaign that you're applying to. Is that clear? So if you have statewide charities that are adjacent, so that means in a campaign region next door to you where your boundaries touch, that local charity over there is not eligible to apply anymore. And this is due, guys, to universal giving. It's kind of a benefit to the charity in some aspect because now they only have to apply once in the campaign they're in, and they're in the list. If the charity's in, Podunk, Alabama, or Podunk, Texas, or what have you, they're in the whole listing, so you can choose any approved charity on the list. It doesn't make sense to have a charity applying to 15 regions just because they have a statewide presence in Texas, and we have 15, 17, however many it is left. In our state. If they are a federation and they have a few members in your region, they can apply on behalf of their members. And what this looks like is they send in the member agency, unaffiliated or /member, it's the same application, to that CFC office with a letter that denotes they are approved to serve as a fiscal agent between them and their member to say, for 2015 only, we are going to serve as their fiduciary agent. Basically, the finance part will be sending the money through that once federation. Those members must be listed in the independent, unaffiliated section. They will not be listed as a federation of that entity. Does this make sense, or am I confusing the heck out of you? Makes sense, kind of? I hope so. Make sense to you? Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, if you guys have questions, Marcus will go into more detail. This is new this year, and it potentially could be pretty confusing. So make sure you understand this before you go back into your review process and realize you've done it all wrong. Been there, done that. This is fantastic. Campaign calendar. So we've got a couple different campaign calendars. We've got the OPM calendar of events. We've got an LFCC meeting schedule that I do for my entity. LFCC subcommittee meetings. Again, this is kind of specific to what we do here in Dallas-Fort Worth, but possibly many of you have the same. And your PCFO calendar of events. So what I typically do is I take the OPM issue calendar and I look specifically for things that are new. There is something specifically new this year that I already pulled OPM aside and said, so tell me more about this. And we'll get to that in a minute. But I take this calendar, which you should all have. If you don't have it, please ask for it because this is imperative to the work that you do. LFCC meeting schedule. Where are we? Do you know where we're at?
Well, yeah.
You want to jump in?
Oh, sure.
Why don't you
So
start?
has everyone seen the OPM schedule of events? Okay, that is regulatory, so I mean, you do have to make sure you follow that. And that goes back to the what you need to follow with, and I know you all can see that up there. But that's schedule events is what the LFCC needs to follow as far as deadlines as well as the PCFO. But we're going to talk about, and again, we won't go into detail on that, but let's talk about some of the LFCC meeting schedules. First of all, the first year, in collaboration with the PCFOs, set a time and dates throughout the calendar year of when you're going to meet. First of all, what is your fiscal year? A good suggestion for a fiscal year is actually to start on March 1 and go through February 28th or 29th if it's a leap year. Why do we do that? Is because you're still collecting pledges throughout sometimes into January, and it takes a little while to finish up the campaign. So again, to start on a fresh year, usually we do, up in Kansas City, we have a fiscal year that we set for March 1st. So establish a meeting guideline. Make sure that you provide this information to the LFCC through, early in the year. Consider what other meetings you might have. For example, we meet every third Wednesday for the FEB. Quite a few of the people that are on the FEB are also on the LFCC. So our CFC meetings are directly following the FEB meetings. How many times should you meet? It is suggested at least quarterly, but it's not mandatory. Again, in Kansas City, we start meeting starting in March and monthly up till July. And quite frankly, after that, we won't meet. We won't meet during the campaign. We'll correspond via email, but if you don't, once you're meeting past July, if you don't have it decided by July, it's not going to happen for the campaign. So preparation up front is key to the campaign. And then finally, at the end of the campaign, we have a final critique meeting to kind of do a hot wash of what we could have done better, do a critique of that. Include the matters of business on the agenda. Make sure you keep good minutes. It is the LFCC's responsibility to keep the minutes. Now, you may designate that to the PCFO, but it is up to the LFCC to have those minutes. Some of the subcommittees. Now, the LFCC can have, branch off in lots of different areas, and you may develop a lot of subcommittees. And again, as Jennifer said, network with other folks in town or in town this week and find out some of the things they're doing. But some of the good subcommittees would be eligibility or application review committee. Have one group that focuses on that. It's not necessarily if you have an LFCC and another good question, how many people should be on LFCC? It could be from 6 to 26. But it's not necessary for you to have a huge campaign cabinet, if you will, or the one that's working on, meeting monthly to work on the campaign. But you can bring in other people during the committees. Through the eligibility committee, we'll have one person that's a senior on the cabinet that will then solicit up to 20 or 30 people to do the reviews, and that would be just federal volunteers, federal employees across the city that will work on that. The financial committee, that's going to work on completing the compliance review, looking at the agreed upon procedures and the documents that the PCFO must submit, as well as the other expenses that are charged to the campaign. And then there's several other committees, whether it's marketing, communications, technologies, awards. So looking at what is going to drive the campaign and make it successful this year. So again, get some ideas of what you might want to do. This is a great time to bring in why a lot of times the LFCC or senior managers that are actually running the campaign. The campaign coordinators a lot of time are the ones with the boots on the ground experience. This is the great time to bring them in, have them included in the committee, and really get some good best practices from the field, if you will. So the PCFO calendar, you want to jump in here?
Sure. I provide this to my LFCC, and what I was saying a moment ago was that I take the OPM calendar, I ask for the FEB calendar, and I take different activities, our subcommittee, the things that we have to do, and I provide this, like Larry said, to provide this to your LFCC at the beginning of the year, your fiscal year, or prior to. Typically, I also include it in my PCFO contract. And while it's very hard to see, it's 3 columns, and I just try to make it very simple for them so that they know what the activity is, the date, time, and the notes is particularly important because what that tells them is, what are our matters of business? What are we voting on? Where are we at with the timeline? And honestly, it's so easy in the season of the madness of what we're doing to forget about having them approve your website. I forgot to have that done. So, hey, let's make sure we reflect that in the minutes. And so this keeps me on track, them on track, all of us on track, and hopefully we don't forget anything that's easy to be forgotten. I think this works well. I have it up in my office. They have copies of it. And it helps us to identify. Sometimes we'll have calls just to connect that are directors' reports or teleconferences or virtual calls, but there are sometimes where it's very important also to come together as a group in person, depending on what the nature of the time of the year is.
So now we're going to look at both arms of the campaign, the PCFO and the LFCC, and then we're going to go through the calendar of what you can expect throughout the year. First of all, the LFCC, a lot of this has been, hold on, we can do it, So close, so close. Hey, there it is. Okay, first of all, what should you do as the LFCC? Read the regulations, okay? They are posted. They're a great thing to read and go to sleep on. So if you want to take them to bed with you, that's it is a lot of legalese, but it is important for you to know the regulations to keep yourself out of the trouble. Prior to being with FEB, I was a PCFO director, and I told my LFCC part of my job is to make sure you don't go to jail. So the PCFO should also know the regulations and make sure that everyone is playing the game the right way. Recruit membership. Again, make sure as LFCC you have a nice array of members, whether it's, you're certainly your largest employer in town. If you have a military base, make sure that you have someone there. Make sure you have someone at the post office. Make sure you have someone from labor involved. Again, get all the different aspects of the campaign to get to some complete fulfillment of that grouping. Make sure the LFCC is trained properly. If they read the regulations, they kind of have an idea. But the first meeting of the year is probably training them as far as what to expect this year. Now, OPM is going to put together a great training process that will be available next fall. Is that correct, Curtis? So again, we'll all be on the same mind frame as far as the campaign, But again, if you have experienced PCFO, lean on them. If you have some experienced LFCC members, make sure to lean on them as far as what exactly needs to be done. Understand the bylaws, understand the budget and expense oversight. Again, you are responsible for those dollars. These are not your dollars, you're not the government dollars, these are the donors' dollars. So we want to make sure that the charities get the most impact for the donations that the employees give. You are responsible for the minutes and the meetings. Again, as a PCFO, quite frankly, I like doing the minutes because, and I'll give you my little secret, I would do the minutes ahead of time. So I would go down and I would put the agenda and say, this is what we think is going to happen. And then I could always correct it after that time. But it always helped me decide, oh, well, I haven't quite gotten there. This is what I need to do on the awards committee. So before the meeting, let's make this call. So again, prepare the minutes ahead of time and look at the agenda and really critique and detail that before you go into the meeting. It makes the meetings go a lot quicker that way. Look at the PCFO and their goals and hold them accountable for the strategic planning and such. As Jennifer said, it's your responsibility to review all the materials, all the websites, as well as making sure this information and the feedback is available to all the nonprofits that want to review that information. And last thing is have federal agency engagement. Our LFCC, way before the campaign, we go out in May and in June, and we try to visit every agency ahead of time. And with that, we're trying to find out three things. First of all, do I have your support for the campaign this year? Second of all, give me your best person to be the coordinator so you look successful. And last thing is, what do you think, considering the climate in your agency right now, if there's retirement and such, what is a good goal for your agency this year? And then we'll come back with all that information that provides us the coordinators' names to the PCFO so they can do the trainings on that. It provides us information on the goal setting, so in July or August we can set a goal for the campaign and advertise that. Now the PCFO, they go into accountability. Come on up here. We'll share a mic.
Excellent.
Okay.
All right, so let's see, PCFO accountability. So like Larry says, not only the regulations, but the memorandums, that's a portion of the OPM site. It's important to revisit those as well, because a lot of times you'll say, well, I didn't know that, and they'll say, memorandum issued in 2006-13 or what have you, and you're going, where's that at? So if you don't know where the tab is that talks about the memorandums, please review that as well. There's a lot of important information in there. Keeping your LFCC informed. A lot of the stuff we've talked about, PCFO, keeping your PCFO, I think for me as a director, I get really entrenched with, I'm the CFC director, and so I work for this LFCC, and I'm just very kind of lopsided sometimes. It's a balancing act. You also need to keep your PCFO out of trouble. Knowing the regulations helps you to know that there are certain things that you have to be in compliance with to keep them out of trouble, your employer. So it is important to understand both sides of how the regs read, how it affects the LFCC and how it affects the PCFO. That's an important balancing act. That calendar I showed you, I have all my deadlines on there, and I usually put it in red. OPM deadline, March 14th, we've got designations due. When we get back, everybody to your office, we all have a deadline, right? 14-17 is open. Let's get our campaign results in, right? So we've got work to do as soon as we get back, a deadline to meet. Schedules, budgets, expense tracking, this is extremely important. Accounting for all of your expenses appropriately on your ledgers, making sure your LFCCs have access, are reviewing or approving your expenses, that they know what's coming up as far as what your expenditures are. Again, my safeguard is just being as transparent as possible. Hey, this is what I think we should be doing. This is my suggestion. What do you guys think is the best opportunity? Because remember, PCFOs, this is not our campaign. This is the federal government campaign. And a lot of PCFO directors honestly forget that. I've been there a time or two where you get so entrenched with really having great ownership over this because it's such a great thing to be involved with. This is their campaign and their decisions to make. So make sure that you're deferring to them to make these decisions.
Yeah.
Right?
Another thing on transparency, put your minutes on your website. You know, we do that, or we've done that in the past, and we send those out to the campaign coordinators throughout the year and ask them for suggestions, and we get a lot of great ideas. Again, it's those boots on the ground that really come across with the great ideas that we can then initiate.
That's fantastic. That's new for me. We don't have our minutes on our website, and I'd never thought about that. You learn something new every day. Thanks, Larry. Fantastic. So you got to go a couple ahead to get back to the one you want. All right, best practices. So that's what this conference is. You're going to take a lot of best practices. What are you doing? What works? Standard operating procedures. I like to document what we do. I have stopped telling my team this because I think our thoughts become our reality. But I used to say, well, if I get hit by a bus, this is where you can find out how to do this. And then I realized I better stop saying that because it'd probably be a semi, and that wouldn't be fun. But having operating procedures in place so that people do understand how to do the work we're doing. And I do not change what we do midstream. So even though we're right in the middle of processing envelopes and suddenly it occurs, hey, maybe we should do it this way, we don't change things midstream. Because to me, that doesn't look good. That's not a best practice when it comes to an audit. Keep things how you do it, and then revisit afterwards. I have a notepad that I just take notes, and I tell my loan executives and my team, take notes throughout the campaign, and let's talk about it. And maybe there is a better way to do this. Fair enough?
Well, and if any slide kind of carries over from year to year and past this year is probably this one. You know, we may not have loan executives, we may not have clear goals that we can set, but these are some of the best practices that we want to do is make sure we still have a plan. You still have LFCC for hopefully forever, or regional RFCCC if that happens. But set the goals. Try to encourage the agency fairs, the agency speakers, loan executives. How many of you use loan executives? How many of you would love to have a loan executive but never have? Yeah, there you go. So, you know, look outside the box, especially for this year. How do we get a loan executive? What grade level does a loan executive have to be? You know, the executive portion kind of makes it sound like they have to be a 12 or 13. You know, we have grades 6 and 7s be a loan executive. Sometimes a coordinator that is real passionate, you know, an agency will lend them out at a given time. If you have people that are close to retirement and you kind of know that and the agency knows it, you know, how about letting them do their final months working on the campaign? We've had tremendous success in obtaining loan executives that way. Or if you have management development programs, this is a fantastic management development program because it works on, you know, communication skills. Oh, well, I see. I need to go through that. Communication skills, writing skills, grammar, as well as going out and meeting other agencies. So again, it's a great development program to encourage your agency heads to get involved.
Absolutely, and I hear loan executives all the time that say, you know, I would have never done that before, and I'm so glad that I did this because they get out and they get to know the community and they get to know the other agencies, and it really is a fantastic program. The goal as a PCFO for me is that the loan executive goes back to their agency more valuable, that they've learned something, that they've grown. If they're going back and it was just a vacation for them and they didn't do much, that's not a win for anyone. So make sure that when you go into, whether it's beginning or continuing to harvest your loan executive program, that you really have goals as a PCFO and that the federal agency understands that there's a standard, there's a measurement that you're going to be reviewing, and that the goal is that they come back a better federal employee. It's great for training purposes. So should we try to go to January?
Yes,
Jump right, we're in February now. Okay, that should get us there. Okay, so now we're going to run through the different months of the campaign. And again, I think that this PowerPoint, you have it on the website. First timers, feel free to look at it and revisit it each month to make sure that you are doing what you're supposed to be doing, because I really tried to capture the important key items for each month. This is specific to my campaign, so you may do things a little differently, and that's okay. January, we're closing out campaign. The season of the madness is trying to come to an end. As you finalize your last pickups. You know, those federal employees, they do their use and lose it in December, so you always have that coordinator that calls and says, oh, I had this envelope I didn't get to you before I left for my 3-week vacation. So you're going to close out your campaign. Look for opportunities to show appreciation. You can never say thank you enough to the people that do this work, whether it's your key workers, your coordinators, your own team doing it for you. I had learned, I think at one of these conferences, it might have been from you at a 101, let me tell you the truth. 7 thank yous before a person truly feels appreciated. And I think that's kind of a poor reflection of our culture. But in America, typically it's 7 thank yous before you get them to say, wow, she does appreciate me. So don't ever waste an opportunity to say, hey, thanks, I noticed that and I appreciate it. Application period, January timeframe, you're setting your one-time payment, you're setting your application period. This is usually, it's not on here, and so I'm going, oh, did I forget it? When I try to approve the website for the year, your website's supposed to be documented somewhere in your minutes that you've approved it annually, right, Curtis? Okay, making sure that's still relevant. Things change, and I go, really? Your calendar, you're setting your calendar and providing it to your team. So guess what? This gives your LFCC the best opportunity to participate because they've got the calendar for the year. PCFO application, if you're on an annual process, this is the time frame. You're going to be looking at OPM's suggested deadline was January 23rd this year. February 6th was the date that the PCFO was supposed to be notified, I believe, for approval of PCFO contracts. And you're preparing your proposed budget to submit. Even if you were on a multi-year agreement, you should still be submitting a budget and reapproving essentially the contract that's in place. Is that correct, Curtis? That's okay, that's our practice.
Budget and timeline.
And timeline, so your campaign activity timeline and such. Let's approve this, let's approve our budget and check off that we've met some regulations, right?
On the charity application process, even if your deadline is April 1st, or what, I'm not sure what the national deadline for local charities are this year, send emails out to the charities in January as early as possible. All of you that have done this in the past, you know all the applications come in a week beforehand. So it's okay to stagger. This is the official deadline for OPM. You can make a deadline for local eligibility of March 15th if you want. So again, in our area, we'll have a deadline for our federation members and their member charities, and then another deadline for the local unaffiliated agencies. So again, that way we have some time to process that before the actual deadline and clean up those messes, if you will, if that are stuff they're missing. Try to help them get approved. And that one-time payment you see from LFCC, that's where the PCFO is being reimbursed for all their expenses. Correct?
Sure. It's not what I meant, but it sounds great. What I meant there was the one-time payouts to charities.
Okay.
You are allowed to pay out your charities a one-time payment, and typically this is to alleviate the administrative burden of cutting checks. Some of you guys might cut them monthly, some cut them quarterly. Sometimes we get designations for a total of maybe $17 to a charity, and to cut that check monthly or quarterly doesn't make sense. And so in January, you present you look at how much designations you had, and I look at the threshold. How many charities do I have receiving $500 or less? Or how many do I have at, $1,000 or less? And I look at these numbers and say, okay, if we put it at this threshold, we're going to alleviate this much administrative burden on the back-end process. So that's what.
Correct.
Correct?
And that amount does need to be approved by the LFCC. So the PCFO reviews that, decides what is a good amount that's not going to break the bank. Again, this must happen before April 1st because the first payouts or first allocation of dollars comes April 1st. But they will let you know, and this should be an annual basis, of what that threshold should be.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Let's see. I think we can move on here. Questions so far? Moving on to February or March. Let's go ahead. One.
All right.
It stopped. Thank you. Okay, so charity application period opens. Like Larry said, you can set this within a certain time frame to what meets your what's best for your campaign. What I've learned, I used to be the person that tried to be way ahead of everything, and so I would set this much earlier, and then I would come to training and realize I knew nothing and get back and be like, oh my gosh, I told them all this, and I was wrong. So I have learned that actually I sent out my notices on Monday, which I don't think was smart because everybody's like, blah, 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 replying to me, and I'm not there, and they're getting out of office. So I'm not sure that was exactly the brightest move either. But typically what I've learned is come to training within that open period so that you don't go back. So when I go back, I'm going to do a charity workshop, which will be in the first week of February or March that you'll see on the next slide. I'll have been trained up to know what has changed. And so I'm not miscommunicating and causing confusion and ultimately causing more administrative chaos for myself and my LFCC. February 6th, as I mentioned a moment ago, that was the deadline for the LFCCs to select their PCFOs. We have deadlines, and sometimes it's not viable to meet deadlines. And any time that occurs where you think that we may not meet that deadline, my best piece of advice to you is to have your LFCC contact OPM, explain the circumstance, and see if you can get an extension on the matter. So again, that's that transparency, that best practice of transparency. Have them communicate so that they can get approval, because when you come back around to the audit and the auditor looks for a date and says they didn't meet it, well, if you have a letter from OPM stating that you had approval, that your deadline was extended, sometimes those auditors will still write it up as a finding because they think that that's what they should do regardless of OPM's letter. But OPM has a copy of their letter and they know that that's okay. So we're attending the annual workshop and training. We've got our data entry that should be completed based on all the envelopes that have come through. The 14-17 results are due February 27th. So this has moved up, I think, about a week from last year. It seems like it was moved up a month because it went from March to February, but it was only a week that it moved up.
We actually just pushed it back to March 6th.
Fantastic.
So you have an extra week.
So then now instead, everybody that was grumbling, they moved it up a month, even though it was 1 week that changed the month. Now you've got a whole nother month because it went from February to March. So let's reverse our thinking and realize we're back on track. But your data entry should be wrapping up for all your pledge cards so that you can meet this deadline that is now March 6th. Fantastic.
Again,
What do you got?
if you're not familiar with 1417, that is the campaign information that will list out what every national, international, and local charity received, and that goes to OPM as well as other information as far as loan executives and community hours.
And campaign
Yeah.
costs. And that 14-17 system, something that we should have had on the January slide. When your PCFO contract is approved or renewed or revisited and reapproved, however you want to term that, you should be going back into that almost immediately, guys, and updating the contact field. That if the PCFO has changed, this is where OPM is notified that they have a new PCFO. Your FEB chair or is FEA in there? I think so, right? No, just FEB. Your FEB information, your LFCC chair, if it's rotating, they will not get the communications from OPM if you have not updated their information. And probably some of you are going, oh my gosh, I haven't done that. That's okay, just go do it. Get it done. If anything changes, make sure you're updating that. That's one of those things it's easy to forget to update a piece of information, even if somebody got married and changed their last name, and so they have a new email. Make sure you keep that contact information updated because that's how OPM communicates with your campaign. That's an important piece of this.
Got a question back here.
All right, where's the question? Oh, Rosemary.
Oh, we'll try.
Okay, if you have a transition from one PCFO to another, and if the former PCFO continues payment from 2016,
Sure.
should that, one of the names of the 1417 include the name from the former PCFO?
That's a fantastic question. So the PCFO has changed from one entity to another. You've got one PCFO still responsible for payouts.
If you've alerted OPM that there's a change in PCFO, we'll have the contact information of the former PCFO. So we'll make sure they get any emails that are related to prior years' reporting requirements.
Okay. Excellent. Great question. Next one. Roll the dice. March is what we're at, right?
Yep.
Okay. Charity workshop training, like I said, so the first week of March, because my deadline, your charity application period has to stay open for 30 days. Is that correct, or is it 21? 30? 30 days. 30 days. So keep that application period. Make sure you're open for 30 days. That's another auditor is looking at that. But have a training session. This helps the administrative burden of this process. So you bring your charities in, you train them up on how to fill out the application, tell them to bring their application and everything they have so far, walk them through the process, network with them, meet them, because then in the fall you're going to train them how to be great speakers, right? And so you build relationships with your charities at this point. Very important process. We've got our designation acknowledgement reports that'll be due out. This is a PCFO's responsibility. You have to document this. While mine go out via email, I have a mail merge that I do to make this process very seamless. What I do is I typically will copy my chair, because that's what they like, and so they are a part of it. Comes out from the LFCC, and it's documented in 2 different mailboxes that it went out on time and what the information was that went out specific to the charity that's receiving that email. Does that make sense? March 13th this year is the deadline for that. Application review process begins. This is one of those subcommittees. The applications must be reviewed and approved by an LLC, federal employee. So you'll begin that process. We got our 1417 charity that's registry that's open. It's very important that when you receive these applications, when these applications come in your door, that you're automatically, immediately entering the information into the 1417. You should not be selecting the field approved, denied, withdrawn. That field you just leave alone. I believe it starts in pending. Leave that alone. Enter all the data, because this is where the verification comes in, and this is something that's on the OPM calendar. If you guys noticed a little bit more verbiage where it said there's got to be some documentation of the process for verifying a 501c3 status. Something drove it last year. I'm not going to try to pretend what did. The bottom line is when the applications come through the door, you enter that information so that you can see whether they're verified or not by the IRS master system, so that your LFCC, again, this is protecting them and protecting you, when you go to vote on your applications, you already know that the system has approved or flagged them as not validated. Is that understood? Enter the application stuff into the 1417 as soon as you get it. Do not wait. I have been that person that has waited in the past because I want to get in there and be one and done, and that could come back to haunt you. So enter it in as soon as you get it. Plus, OPM closes that system, so we have a deadline to meet. Your final budget should be approved, because at this point, if you're doing like Larry said, March 1st through February, now you know exactly where you're projected, where you landed. You're letting your board see again that this was our final numbers, this is where we landed, and you're approving the final budget and moving on with your already approved budget. Anytime there's a change in your budget, LFCC has to approve it, so make sure you're transparent and you help them to understand we see this coming, or if they want to do something different, or we can save here and you're going to make an amendment to your budget, document it in the minutes, and make sure your LFCC approves that amendment.
Just remember, with the budget, the PCFO will be reimbursed up to 110% of the budget request. So if they go over that and your budget's $100,000, if you spend 112, okay, who pays that extra $2,000? Well, whoever the PCFO is. The PCFO has to eat it. Okay, but it's okay if you decide during the middle of the campaign or the planning of the campaign, hey, we want to install this recognition program for this year and we need some more money from the budget. You can do that. You can actually update the budget and amend the budget throughout the year.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so let's see. So we've got our final disbursement that goes out March 31st. So payroll, or your finance office, is very busy. March 31st, you got your final payment. This year, the final payment is for the 2013 campaign, and then your first payment is due out the next day for the 2014 campaign. I try to send a notice with my payments that say, These are your funds, your final payment from the 2013 campaign, Dallas-Fort Worth, CFC. Please let these charities know, especially with universal giving. Don't just send a check or do any EFT. Make sure they know where the money is coming from, because chances are, one of the things that I'm expecting or anticipating with the universal giving is we're going to have charities from, Podunk, Alabama, calling me saying, why am I getting, money from you now? Because I didn't explain to them that this is where it was coming from in light of universal giving. They don't know what they don't know. So make sure you communicate, this is where this money is coming from and this is what it's for. Very important. Your finance officer should be doing that. Agree?
Agreed. One thing to understand about the campaigns, right now, we have two different campaigns going on right now. You're planning for the 2015 campaign, but you're finalizing the 2014 campaign. Actually, we have three campaigns going on because they may have not completely paid out the 2013 campaign. Donations, allocations, designations, or donor, what am I looking for?
Designation acknowledgement?
Well, yeah.
Acknowledgement.
Basically, payroll deductions. Payroll deductions will continue to come into the PCFO into February each year. So again, the final payment for 2013 is now going out. 14 is just now starting. They're starting to get payments or the payroll deductions in for 14. And now you're already planning for 15. So, I mean, you kind of have to juggle that, and you have to lean on, LFCC needs to lean on the PCFO needs to lean on the LFCC for that. Remember, though, when you are planning and you're doing your final expenses, that with the final expenses that may be approved, for example, we approved the final expenses for the 2014 campaign in March, we have to add in what we think the audit's going to cost, because the audit's not going to happen until later on, and whatever expenses is going to be to pay to send out the rest of the allocations to the campaign. So again, you have to keep in mind you're looking a little bit into the future for payments and expenses.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Excellent. Let's
Yes.
go with the question.
As you're talking about the overlapping campaigns, we're finalizing 2013, starting the finalizing process, and we get to start for 2014. While planning for 2015, with the proposed changes come 2016, how will existing PCFOs who in the new vision won't exist be able to do the closeouts appropriately?
I'm going to
Please make sure to use the
microphone.
that we're trying to capture for the video.
This one?
Make sure to use the mic on the back.
I do, and it goes up like 3 tracks every time. Okay. I cannot answer that question. The question was, how do we anticipate with the changes that are coming? I heard what you said, and honestly, we don't have answers, and I can't answer that question.
There are some things that OPM is still trying to work through as far as expenses that will carry over for further years. Keep in mind, when you're setting the budget for this year, you're setting the budget for what's going to carry forth for 2 years. So when you're putting out, if it's someone working in accounting that is cutting those checks or mailing or such like that, you need to set the budget for that. You know that the audits that is currently that you're putting in the budget for this year is actually the audit that's going to happen after this campaign is over. So, I mean, those are expenses. Now, OPM will clarify this, and hopefully they'll talk about this a little bit more in future workshops the next 2 days. But hopefully there's some clarifications. Like I said, we don't know much more than you do at this point in time.
And I do think, let me just tell you too, I do think the thing that you guys have to remember is that while January 1, 2016 is being embedded into our brains as this day that changes everything, we still have the 2015 campaign to run to pay out through, we'll say, March of 2017. It's like an 18-month process.
Could be.
So don't hang up your hats and run out the door January 1st or December 31st, people. We still have lots of work to do. Even in light of this national map and so forth, slow down. We don't know what the changes are, and I don't know how much information we're going to get. I think they're going to give us as much as they can, and there'll be more to come. So this is a process. It's going to take time. It's not going to happen as overnight as it feels. Did you have a question, sir?
I do. It's kind of follow-up from my PCFO's question. Because part of the closeout is LFCC responsibility for authorizing reimbursement of expenses and things of that nature.
Correct.
And LFCCs aren't going to exist with that PCFO relationship. So do we have any information about how the LFCC is going to transition as well all the way into 2017?
I think that they have some information, and so I would caution you to say, while I hear what you're saying, the relationship isn't going to exist. It will exist in some capacity. We may not know exactly what it looks like, but there will be a relationship. They want the local engagement to be sustained. It's not going away. They have expectations of these LFCC members to stay in their local communities and to be engaged. So I do think that there's going to be some relationship that does exist that will allow those functions to occur when the time is right. Go ahead and throw an apple at me.
You got your work cut out for you, Curtis.
Curtis left the room. Curtis has left the room. Okay, so let's get to April, because we do have a little bit of time here. And I know there's a lot of questions. And let me say, too, guys, there's a lot of emotion here, even as first-timers. You can imagine some of the people that have been doing this work for a long time. Try to make the most, see life through a positive rose-colored glasses while you're here. Take what you can with you, and know that change is the only constant. And we are going to get through this. So, try not to be too, I'm with you. But let's focus on the good. So April 1st, we got our first distribution that's coming out from the 2014. We've got the local application deadline. Again, like Larry said, you can set this earlier, but the deadline is April 1st. Should be on your calendar. Application review continued. If you have appeals and such, you're going to have appeal review process. If in the event that you've denied somebody and they appeal and go through that process, you'll have your committee come back together to review those applications. Charity data, this is what I was talking about when I said as these applications come in the door, enter that data as soon as you get them. It's cumbersome, so please enter that data because OPM typically will turn this system off on this date. Sometimes they'll give us a moment or two, but get your information in as soon as possible because you'd hate to have the system turned off because they go on to other processes with the system, so they change the function. Make sure you get the data entered. Determination of eligibility, April 30th. Again, it must be based on OPM's verification of the status. So this is why we're entering the data. The system updates, I think it's nightly, isn't it? Every night? Mm-hmm. And so if there's any issues, it's going to kick back that next day. And you'll be able to go to your LFCC and say, while you've got that application in your hand, it's not being verified. So let's be careful how we approve or deny this charity. Let's see if we can work through this. When you notify them, if they are approved, you can do it electronically. If they are denied, you have to do it certified mail, because there's a whole calendar for that. And you must include the 5-digit code in your notification. So they know what their code is, and it's documented. Again, the LFCC must approve, document the procedure for that verification of the 1417. Denial is sent via certified mail. And this is another opportunity to say, hey, would you like to provide feedback to the campaign? Many opportunities when you're communicating with your charities to provide feedback. Do you have anything here, Larry? Okay. I did just tap it. Were we in April or May?
We're May now.
Okay.
There we go.
Application appeal review, again, if you got any denials and they go through that process, your board has to revisit that. The appeal process is what it is. You deny them. If your LFCC denies them, regardless of what the reason is, they have to appeal to the LFCC first. You can't bypass your LFCC even though you know your LFCC is going to have to re-deny them. They have to appeal back to your LFCC. The LFCC has to say again, you're denied. And then that charity has to take all the documentation, denial letters included, and send it on to OPM with an appeal. That's the process. It can't be changed. So don't email OPM and say, can't we just send it straight to you? Because they will tell you, go through the process. Been there and done that. Marketing technology, award planning, anything that's going on in your subcommittee, schedule your meetings, have the meetings start thinking about different best practices or things you want to incorporate. Again, guys, right now it's business as usual. So put 2016 and the changes where they're at. If OPM covers some of those later in your sessions, great, ask those questions then, but keep business as usual hats on for the other sessions, because right now we're operating under the new regs. We are not operating, or the old regs, scratch that. God bless. We are operating under the old regs, okay? Old regs, that sounds, the current regs, how about that? Audit preparations, you should have your finance committee working with getting, your LFCC is supposed to choose and hire your independent auditor. How many of you guys knew that or didn't know that? A lot of times PCFOs get into the rut, we just keep using the same one we're using, and sometimes you're getting a great deal and it works, but make sure your LFCC is involved in approving who the auditor is going to be. That's a very important function that I think oftentimes gets overlooked. Agree? I feel like you're right behind me. Okay. Recruiting of LEs, we've talked about this. May 3rd through 9th is your Public Service Recognition Week for federal government. This is a great time to collaborate with your FEBs and to recognize your CFC achievements. And I think it's particularly fantastic because this is an opportunity outside of campaign season that you can bring awareness and recognition to the CFC, so it's not that unforgotten time of the year. So capitalize on that if you can. Eligibility decisions, 14-17. And scheduling your agency meetings. Look at your agencies, your top agencies, who's doing well, who's not doing well. Don't just show up to the agencies that aren't doing well. Show up to the ones that are doing well too and thank them. So get your LFCC engaged. If you know there's a lot of potential and it's not occurring, talk with your LFCC members and get either your chair or other LFCC members to meet and talk and begin scheduling goals and campaign plans and coordinators and all that great stuff. This is terrible. Feel free to jump in. Local appeal deadline, so if you have any appeals, June 5th is the date. We've got our agency calls going on. You're out meeting with the different agencies, setting goals. Loaned executive coordinator recruitment's continuing. You've got your audit. Your LFCC compliance report is one piece of it. Typically, this is when I'll have one of my LFCC members or multiple of them come in and do their compliance assessment, which is a piece of the audit that ends up on OPM's desk. June 12th is the deadline to ensure eligibility decisions into the 14-17. It's closed. Approved, denied, maybe they withdrew. Make sure those flags are set. OPM does not touch this field. It's only done by the PCFO. Make sure you go back in. Just because you've entered the charity data, now you have to flag them as to where they fall on your list, approved or denied. Wow, that worked. Yay. You want to cover July?
Sure.
Why don't you cover July?
Need some water?
Yeah. Down now.
Okay, so now we're to July. So right now, the deadline for OPM to get the national, international agencies are back to us, or to the PCFO. So now you can start creating your charity listing, local charity listings. So by that time, local appeals, again, a charity could be disapproved by you, but they could appeal to OPM. So OPM has till the end of July to actually get that final appeal back to you. So at this time, you should be preparing the charity list, and it's OPM will send you the final listing of approved charities by whatever you put in the 14-17. They've sent you national, international charities. Now they're going to give you the final list of your local charities. You should be looking at the pledge forms. Keep in mind, if you are ordering pledge forms and you want to have them for workshops, your workshop may start in July. Make sure to order those pledge cards in May or early June in order to get them by that time. Make sure to order pledge cards 110%. Make sure that everyone has an opportunity to give if they would like to. Make sure the materials and incentives, any awards items that you plan to order, make sure that you order those. And this is a perfect opportunity with the conference. Go out and visit with the vendors. They're all great people and love your business. So get an idea of what you think would really drive your donors this year. And get the approval. Try to get those ordered by late April, May, so you have them back in time for those summer workshops. The distribution deadline, again, your first distribution must happen by April 1st. If you are doing it quarterly, and again, the LFCC should take a vote as far as quarterly or monthly payments. That second distribution should happen in the end of July. And finally, the PCFO must have their portion of the compliance audit back to the LFCC there by August 3rd, I believe. In August, there's the deadline to present that to the LFCC. You see there. By the 7th, OPM should have the universal giving list to you. So that is something that you can either download in CFC Assistant or whatever program you are to tracking the campaign. It also will be available to CFC Nexus if you use them for with your pledge processing or for your website. Charity training, speakers and fairs. Again, you want to do key worker training, campaign coordinator training, as you see. Combine some of those. We like to have a charity fair, or because of the size, usually is a federation fair right before the coordinator training. So right before they kind of get a sense of why they're doing this, and the importance and the best practices of being a campaign coordinator or a key worker, we have an agency fair. It gives them an idea of some of the local charities that they're part of the campaign. But also, don't forget to include the national charities. In May or early June, send a note to the national, international charities. A lot of times they have a big marketing budget, and they'll send you doodads, whether it's stress relievers, pens, or stuff. Those are things, again, you can't provide food anymore, but it drives people to your charities fair. So reach out to the national charities and try to get some of those doodads or those items that will drive people to come to your fairs. The loan executives training will start in August, and loan executives, it depends upon the time frame of your campaign. They may run an 11-week or a couple weeks or 3 months. So again, try to get them sized up and trained during that time frame as well. Okay, you got the
Yeah, and I'll add too, as far as the loan executive training, what I've realized is that I'm more successful if I train my loan executives one-on-one. It gives me an opportunity to get to know them, to understand them, their working style, and to really, it's hard to get them all in the same rooms. Sometimes they'll stagger in. Your coordinators, your LEs will get named at different times. Just roll with it and make sure that you provide adequate training to everybody that you're working with. September 1st, here we go, season of the madness. Typically what I see is that the government agencies are busy with their fiscal year end, and so they're not very engaged. So I see the campaign picks up in October more than September, but this is an opportunity for those asks to be being made, so make sure that you capitalize on it to the best of your ability. September 15th and 30th, we have deadlines here for our audit. All of your audit documents need to be provided to OPM. If they are going via paper, they must be on their desk by September 15th. If you're going to send them electronically, you can send them September 30th.
That's actually a LFCC responsibility. The PCFO has responsibility to get it to the LFCC by August 3rd. It's the LFCC's responsibility to get it to OPM by these deadlines.
Absolutely. So make sure they're included in that correspondence or sending those correspondence to OPM. Coordinator key worker training, we're continuing. We're doing kickoffs. We're out in the federal agencies, being road warriors. And the beginning process of data entry begins. So make sure you've got your standard processes, procedures of operation in place so that your team can help with that process. And this is just never going to end. October, campaign continues. The majority of your accounts will launch typically right after Columbus Day. 6 weeks is typically what they run, and so help them to understand what that looks like when you're working with them. Account follow-up, educating your LFCC as to the campaign progress. It's hard sometimes to meet during this time because you're just so in the thick of it, but make sure your LFCC understands which accounts are at the table participating and which ones are maybe not at the table because you still don't got a coordinator named for somebody. Let them help you. Delegation is important. October 31st, we got our third distribution deadline, so that's going out. Make sure you're meeting those. Campaigns continuing, account management. Payroll information is due to OPM. Typically in November, you'll get an email that says update your account information, your PCFO payment information. They provide this to the payroll centers. We don't communicate with pay centers. OPM does that. If anything changes throughout the year, tell OPM and update this information. I think they send it monthly to the pay centers. So if something changes during a different month, that's okay. Make sure you get the form from OPM, get it filled out, and sent to them so they can inform the pay centers of the change in your information. Make sense? Questions so far? We just want to end. Oh my gosh, you'd think I would just know December. Just know December, Jennifer. Account management, December 15, your campaign closes. From time to time, we extend. You may only extend the ask with OPM's approval. You can still collect, but the ask cannot be being made. Pretty clear, right? Closeout practices, December. We've got websites that are very beneficial. CFC Today, OPM, you should have your own website. Be checking in on these so you can make sure you're in compliance and that you know what's going on in the world. Since we live in our own little worlds in our little cities around the country, make sure you are checking in on OPM's site and the other ones to see if anything's changed. There are lots of resources that we've talked about. OPM, know your regional representative. If you don't know who they are, find them and at least say hello to them. FEB, FEAs, other PCFOs, step out on that ledge, be brave, and don't be an introvert and stick to your little groups. You came here to collaborate, right? And that's it. That's all we got.